Good evening. My name is Bruce Montgomery, and thank you for joining us on another edition of Technology Access Television. Well, I hope you really realize how lucky you are. You happen to be in exactly the right city, exactly the right state, at exactly the right time. If you are an entrepreneur, an innovator, starting a business, scaling a business, growing a business, doing anything that is creating jobs and wealth, you couldn't be in a better place. Chicago is blowing up, and there are some phenomenal resources that are coming to the table from all levels. Yes, we're a little fortunate. We've got a guy that came from the state that happens to be in the White House, and he kind of is excited about entrepreneurship and small business himself. But we also have, and are fortunate to have, some leaders throughout this state that are really behind this trend to grow and scale businesses and to create opportunities and to create jobs. And my guest today happens to represent exactly what I'm talking about. Yes, the state of Illinois has got its game face on, and it is putting players on the field that are getting the job done. And my guest today is one of those players. We're fortunate to have him because I knew him when he was an entrepreneur, and you know what? He still is. And that's the best thing about him, is because he knows what it's like to run and make business happen. And we can't have better people on the government side of the table that understand what business creation is all about. And I want to thank Orlando Saez for being here today.
Thank
Orlando,
you, Bruce.
good to see you.
Thank you, Bruce. Thank you for inviting me. This is
well,
great.
Certainly, you and I go back to those days of telecom and of bit chasing and deal chasing. So I do know that you do know about business creation. And when you took the job at the state, I'm like, what is this guy doing? Does he know what he's getting himself into? How did you get hooked into being this director of this brand new Department of Innovation?
Well, just like you were challenged with the same notion, I was challenged the same way. I was thinking, it's like, why am I getting into this? So I think it's being at the right place at the right time, like you said. So one of the conditions was I am involved in a number of civic boards. So I was involved in the board of the CEC, which actually happened to be a grantee for the state. I'm very involved in fundraising activity, providing support to businesses. So in one dinner, some of the folks from the state said, hey, this is a guy that actually has some chips around the shoulder and can actually drive some narrative around how to solve the problems. He knows how to translate. He works with these Web 2.0 people, you know. And I was on the sidelines. I had just exited a company that sold, Boingo Wireless, which is the largest Wi-Fi aggregator in the world. Yeah. We did a transaction.
So from your activity at O'Hare and when you were first involved with Wi-Fi, you ended up going to Boingo?
Yes. So in the last 10 years, I did about 5 businesses. 2 had a material transaction of about $50 million. Boingo was one. We sold to NEA Capital. So I was sitting in the sidelines. I was sitting in the sidelines and happened to be involved. And the governor and some of the folks in the state said, what are you doing these days? And I said, well, I'm just in between jobs. And they said, well, what if we bring you to do X? And I said, why do I want to do X, right? and the interesting part was they provided especially a space and a runway to be able to say, Illinois has to be business relevant. And we need to think about economic development policies in a different way. Groupon didn't exist. They didn't create jobs from day one. How come they are actually a phenomenal employer today? So that is actually the category. So everything that is theme associated with innovation, new policies, building new ideas in terms of how to connect and how to be relevant, not necessarily with government programs, but allowing and empowering organizations and service providers to actually go out and do great things for the state. We are just an actor in a broader picture. That is part of why I was excited about this job, and I couldn't be luckier about the time that we are today.
So then let's give, you are with you're inside of the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity.
Correct. So I'm part of the DCO, the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, is the economic development agency for the state.
Okay.
Manage about $3 billion business, or $3 billion in business set-asides, tax incentives, and workforce programs. I manage about $400 million under an office called the Office of Entrepreneurship, Innovation, and Technology, which is essentially kind of, I'm the Johnny Appleseed for the small business for the state of Illinois, and anything related to innovation.
And Illinois has had some phenomenal programs. I believe the SBDC, Small Business Development Centers, roll up under your department. To talk about some of the other things that are under your purview, because this is a new carve-out within the agency to focus on entrepreneurship and innovation.
Absolutely. So traditionally, the way that the office has been configured is, as you pointed out, this notion of the Small Business Development Center, which is an SBA program that essentially provides free services to any entrepreneur that wants to come in to actually figure out how to get their business plan, how to understand that they have a business model, how to connect the dots with their ideas as to resources that can help them get more customers, get more financing support. We have 35 touch points throughout the state that are co-opted in with universities, Chamber of Commerce, throughout the state, and that's actually part of what we support. We don't stop there. So part of the new configuration of this is like, hey, listen, SBDC is a great vehicle for us to actually have access to market and to actually provide coverage, but there are other folks that are doing great things, not just as prescribed by SBA. You've been talking with other folks, Kevin Willer, Troy Hennicoff. There are tremendous new stars that are not necessarily directed or related with the instruction handbook that the government has to be able to do a lot of impact.
Right.
And so part of what we need to do is retool ourselves to actually support organizations like that. In that capacity, there's a lot of things that now we're supporting. 1871 is an example. Traditional government infrastructure capital dollars go to universities. R&D, that's kind of the top-down approach of government in the past. Today, we're looking at third-party, public-private sector initiatives like 1871, and we're saying, you know what, here is a community leader and an investment that has been tremendously successful, J.B. Pritzker, and he said, I'm going to actually go out and put this.
And you know what's so exciting about this, Orlando, is government's problem most of the time is slow reaction. Speed to move. That just doesn't cut it in the marketplace, because we're not only competing against other states and other cities, we're competing against all around the world. To see this state move with this swiftness, where people are just figuring out what 1871 is, and the state is already in there supporting it, pushing it forward, saying, hey, let's make it happen. So I think somebody got the governor the message that, hey, you've got to move. If you want to have impact on the ground and job creation, it's not about la-di-da, take your time, push this up the smokestack. I mean, you've got to make some things happen and make some decisions, and it seems like he's doing just that.
Yeah, so let me, this is an important point. How quick we need to react to the market demand to be relevant, it's a very interesting point. So here's an example. In the 1871, as other things that are going around the city, around the state, here's what's going on. There is a better and deeper conversation between the administration and the business community to make that happen. The governor last year activated or enacted the Illinois Innovation Council, which is basically bringing 14 or 15 of the thought leaders in the community, Eric Isaacs, Oregon National Laboratory Director, Brad Keywell, Matt Maloney from Grubhub. So you have the new guys in business, the old established business, universities, all in one platform to engage in a debate of ideal conversations as to what do we need to do to be relevant from an economic growth. And so things related to 1871 and others, I don't have to do a lot of advocacy. I'm not the sole voice actually,
The
running
governor's
upstream.
hearing it from the horse's mouth.
He's hearing it from so many places that that particular piece, not just for the governor, but the legislative side and the policymakers, it's actually a great time to be able to be in an advocacy role for the business community.
Great. Well, now you, of course, are passionate about some other things as well, about inclusiveness, about diversity, about getting this job creation message out to all ends of the state. Because I think when you take a position like yours, it's not just about, a lot of times so much of the conversation dwindles down to Chicago versus Springfield or Chicago versus downstate. But as you've gone around the state, you have to be impressed with the pockets of innovation that's all over this state.
Yeah.
And finally, we're starting to get it, is that, yes, Chicago is a big and important guy, but so is Carbondale, so is Champaign-Urbana, so is Eastern Illinois, so is Quad Cities. We've got innovation that's happening all over this state, and it just makes you, it has to make you feel good how vital this state is.
It's amazing. I mean, this idea of whether it's diversity, let me actually put it under the umbrella of something that we're looking at, activating all of the assets that we have, whether it's the people assets, the diversity, or just the geography that we have. We have a tremendous landmass, and we have different pockets of diversity, whether it's human capital, whether it's ethnicity, where there's a lot of creativity that in order to foster innovation, you know what you need to do? You need to bring proximity. So a couple of the themes that we have and that we're challenged with is, let's look at how can we activate assets that traditionally might not be activated, and how do we reduce the distance between the conversation that happened between those two activities in one place. University of Illinois in Urbana. Huge incubator of human capital, one of the top in the world, in the country, number 5 and number 1 in several categories, engineering, science, and math. There's a lot of activity there. In the city, there's tremendous human capital related to business activity. MBA programs, Northwestern, University of Chicago. How do we actually synergize that deeper so that we can create the next big idea, and how do we solve the biggest problems of the current generation? Healthcare, manufacturing, advanced materials. You got to bring these together, and then the test bed as to where this happened. It can be Peoria. It can be Carbondale. Why? Because there's tremendous assets that are native to those geographies that we got to figure out how to activate. So a lot of what we're challenged day in and day out is how do we connect the dots, and how do we actually leverage those assets? And that happens through geographies, that happens through community involvement, that happens through diversity of thinking and interdisciplinary. That is actually very key in our process.
Let's talk about some of the specific tools in your toolkit. Because when it really gets down to it, you've been on the other side of the table. So you know what you mostly don't want to do. You mostly don't want to hear from government. You want to get out of the way. But if somebody's going to bring something, you want them to bring some assets. You want them to bring something that add value. So as you're trying to look at this amorphous thing called the state of Illinois, and you're trying to pull and leverage and grab some resources that can be your ammunition, how are you starting to shape the deliverables that you're able to knock on the door, and when an entrepreneur comes to you and say, if you want to do something, do this, you can say, hey, not only can I do that, I can do these things too. What are some of those tools you're starting to package up?
I am extremely excited. I have a number of pages because not everything fits into one in my head. So I can tell you there's a lot of things, but let me give you something of a context, and this is just more from a personal perspective. I came to Illinois in 1987, graduated, computer engineering, AT&T Bell Labs in Naperville. Essentially, there was an oversupply of employers, right, in capacity, and there was a huge demand for engineering. AT&T rolled the red carpet. I came in, master's, everything paid. I have a 25-year-old daughter. She's having a challenge with nursing and finding a job. So we're living in a totally different time in terms of what support infrastructure is needed back in our day available and what could be available for the next generation to be successful. So we're competing in a world stage. We need to have tools. In my businesses, I didn't have any government support. You just do it, hard work and organic growth and sweat equity and all that. Today, the next generation of successful entrepreneurs can enjoy some support systems, and I think these tools that we have today are very relevant. So I can tell you, the one that I'm the most excited about, so we're exploring all kinds of things. So let me give you kind of the dimensions of support. Traditional type of activities like tax incentives, edge tax credit, direct efforts for training, workforce, that is actually very important. That's the mainstay. That's kind of like the cash cow. That will continue to be there. That is very much needed for large companies and workforce. Some things that are more in the innovative side, we're starting to explore something that we received recently. The U.S. Department of Treasury basically entrusted us with $78 million as an exploration of how can we take $78 million and make direct investments, whether it's from a lending perspective or venture capital. So here's the interesting thing. Do you want the state of Illinois to own an equity in a small business? Never in the state's history we've had the state wearing the venture capital it has. Now we are. So that's a very interesting role that we can debate all day long.
Well, actually, I was thinking about that as you had mentioned that, because many of us sit back and we see these tax incentives roll out. And so I probably shouldn't name names, so I guess I won't, but I saw somebody get a real big package. And I said, well, wouldn't it be nice if we had some equity in that package? And no sooner than I said that, about 30 days later, the company sold out to Google or something. And I said, well, now see, if we had some equity, we'd be having a payday right now.
Exactly.
So, the state needs to have a payday. We need to have some opportunity of the taxpayers getting a return for some of these kinds of things. So when we talk about CDFIs or other types of equity instruments, there could be some democracy in the dispensation of these funds. They don't just go to big guys who claim they're going to keep some jobs in the state. They could go to startup guys that are talking about creating some jobs in this state. And if they win, it's a win-win both for themselves as companies and also for the taxpayers of Illinois, because they'll have revenue-producing companies and maybe a little windfall of equity.
I am absolutely thrilled about this program, and just like you're saying, because you're right, the traditional way of support incentives comes in the category of grants, which is just activity-driven, and then we applaud in terms of they create the outcomes. By being an equity partner, there is an aligned incentive that the success from a production of wealth and production of job, and the windfall, everybody wins. So I think the alignment is there, and I think that's great. We announced Advantage Illinois in October of last year. Since then, we opened the doors around November. Since then, we've actually have 7 investments, and one of the advantages, not just capital support that we're activating in the market for small businesses that otherwise would not qualify for a loan, because these are pre-revenue.
global business-like activities. Even having small businesses pay more attention to the global landscape. Those seem like great opportunities to leverage transportation, tourism, and technology to be drivers for innovation and acceleration.
You're so right about that, Bruce. In mid-July, after the president of China was here about a year ago, I had the pleasure to go to China and do kind of some of the advancement work for the governor.
Wow.
The governor went to visit late last year China.
Okay.
So obviously China is a very powerful trading partner with Illinois, and so it doesn't come as a surprise that a lot of the companies that are the large companies in Illinois, most of their activity from a revenue production perspective happens outside of Illinois.
That's right.
And it's actually international. So there's no question that anything that relates for the success and the competitive advantage of Illinois in the future is going to be very, very centered around how do we partner and how do we leverage relationships internationally. No question about it. What we do here, and Chicago in particular, sits in an incredibly good position because from a quality of life, you want to hang out, you want to be here. We have tremendous arts theater. So there are a number of collateral industries. And those are businesses, and that's very important.
That can expand with innovation, incorporate some of these technologies. When we think about hospitality technology, just the whole dining and entertainment experiences are being revolutionized by mobile technology, by wireless technology, by broadband infrastructure. So these are things that we can start to create this whole app economy to drive apps in healthcare, apps in entertainment, apps in transportation, can play off of these kinds of things and really make Chicago the go-to place. And we're already seeing that. You know, Nokia came to Chicago, made an investment in this little company called Navtech, spent, I don't know, $1 billion, and that was the largest investment in the history of one of the global leaders in wireless. And so these are the kinds of stories that ripple throughout the global landscape, or letting people know that, you know, Illinois is the place where people should be looking.
I'll give you statistics. I mean, you're talking about the app economy, right? And you and I are partial to the telecom world from our, prior days.
Right.
And again, you mentioned something that is very unique and very important to recognize from a competitive advantage. Illinois sits in the in the best position from a transportation hub and logistics. So anything that relates to Illinois and Chicago as being the intersection in the world to actually be a transaction hub, it's very important. Application development and anything that relates to mobile, it's huge. I was reading a statistic that McKinsey put out there in terms of how many jobs are in the app economy. There's 500,000 jobs today, and they anticipate that in the next 5 years, it's probably going to double. So there is actually 1 million people just dedicated into the app development economy. Just developers just doing application development. That's huge.
This is so exciting, and again, Illinois, Chicago, the entire state is just exploding with enthusiasm, partly because we're having the good sense to bring people like you on who have the ear of both the business community, the investment community, and now maybe for the first time, the public sector. You've got people that are listening to business people. So I'm so happy that you could come by today, because it's important for the public to know that everybody's not a politician. Everybody's not, dyed in the wool, horse trading, smoking cigars in the back room. Some folks